This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
When people ask me, what is Black Radical Queer Podcast? I tell them that BRQ is a show for Black queer folks to tell our own stories on our own terms. So it's a show where we're not objects or sidekicks or props or any of those things. We are the subjects. And so we're the narrators of our own stories, as we should be. And that's radical in a world that seeks to silence us every chance they get.
All the way from the A, you listen to my favorite lesbian on BRQ.
Hey, stay locked in with your favorite lesbian on Black Radical Queer. Yeah.
Hey y'all, this is Javia Nicole, aka your favorite lesbian, and you're listening to Black Radical Queer Podcast, our stories on our own terms. Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Black Radical Queer Podcast. Today I am joined by my producer because I wanted to have a conversation about some of our experiences just being working women, working Black queer women, and what that's been like, kind of where those things intersect in the workplace, and just kind of like what our background has been with jobs and stuff. Of course, you know, we're both doing, you know, podcasts and ManeHustle. Even the tagline is like, to make your side hustle your main hustle. And so we have this ideal to, of course, like not have to like work for other people and to do what it is that we're passionate about. But, you know, on the journey to that, we have plenty of work experience that we've had. So that's something that I wanted to talk about today. So, I mean, by now, I'm assuming that you all know, but if just in case this is your first episode, like tuning in with me, then I want to give Sharmane an opportunity to introduce herself, and then we can get into our conversation.
Thank you for having me back. I'm Sharmane, Mixed Girl Maine. I produce Black Radical Queer. I also am the host and or co-host of Militantly Mixed, Blurred Comics, and Bi Furious with Mixed Girl Maine. And, you know, like Javia said, actively trying to turn this side hustle into our main hustle so that we don't ever have to work for rich white people anymore, basically.
Right. I mean, the thing that is about this, like I specifically wanted to have Sharmane on to talk about this with me because, I mean, for one, we both have a lot of just kind of, I guess, job and career background stuff, but also because we are actively like wanting to get away from that and wanting to be able to make a living off of what we enjoy doing. And so I think that's really like we're kind of on this professional or like career journey, whatever, to transition from working for other people and kind of being, you know, just like another player in this game, to really shifting and like centering ourselves in our work and being able to do something that is, yes, it's work for sure, but it's also enjoyable and it's fulfilling and it's rewarding. You know, it's not just like, okay, let me clock in and out for this check. That's important. We need the coins,
right.
Which is why we're still,
yeah,
you know,
we definitely
need
the coins.
You know, but if we can get the coins by doing what we love, that will definitely be ideal. So I'll let Sharmane kind of give you all some background on like her professional background, career background or whatever, and then I'll follow up with mine.
I got kind of a weird work experience. Every time I have to deliver my resume in front of people, they always say like, you've worked in such a variety of industries, but pretty much what I've done has been the same in almost everything. I mean, I went to film school and I've got my master's in entertainment business, but I rarely ever get to apply any of my degrees to the work that I'm doing. So I end up being either like a project manager or an operations manager, most recently an executive assistant or an office manager, you know, things like that. And so my skill set it's like advanced for what it is, but it is plug and play. So I can work at an agricultural company, or I could work at a tech company, and I can be an operations manager at Dell and shit like that. And it's all my same skills apply. But I started out where I was just kind of the person that the women in my family have such strong work ethic, and they've taught me that you have to grind. And so in the early days of my career, I was that person that was working from 8 in the morning till like 10 or 11 at night. In some cases, I worked for a market research firm, and the boss there was kind of insane. She was a bit of a, I would say in hindsight, she probably was manic, but not that I knew of anything, no diagnosis or anything like that. And she was also anorexic, and so she was intense all the time, and people would quit constantly. And every time someone would quit, I would get more responsibility. And the money wasn't matching, but for my age and at the time, I thought the money was pretty good for what I was doing. So I was working at 8 o'clock in the morning. I was leaving at 11 o'clock at night. I was barely getting any sleep. And I was working there on and off for 5 years. I'd like quit when I'd get overwhelmed, and then her husband would come and offer me more money, and I'd come back. And I just thought that was what I was supposed to do. I was just supposed to grind, improve myself, and eventually everything, I would be some kind of a boss and a millionaire. That never really happened. I finally broke there and went on to another place, and I didn't have to work as many hours, but I would notice that because I was like an office manager / HR person, and I would notice that because they placed me in the front desk, I would tend to be really disregarded for my skills or for my knowledge or anything. So anytime I'd come out with some idea for cost savings or streamlining some process or anything like that, they'd go, "Oh, look at you," and it always made me feel strange because
wow.
primarily that place was very white. There was a little bit, it was primarily white. There was a couple of scientists there. It was an agricultural place that were of Latin descent, and then all 3 Asians were up front, and and I was one. So we were like a little Hello Kitty club in the front of the office, and I was the like main person that people saw when they walked in the door, and then the accounting assistant was behind a partition but still in the front, and then the full accounting, the finance assistant was in behind one partition, and then the assistant to her was in the other one. So they just had all our little Asian selves clustered in the front, and we would get spoken to as a team. Like, we weren't even in the same department, but they would come in and be like, "You gals, blah 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 blah." So it always felt we were always very aware that we were the Asians. And I called it the Hello Kitty Club because one time someone said, "Oh, look at you guys. You're just like a little Hello Kitty Club." To be fair, we did all have something Hello Kitty. Yeah, it happened. We did all have something Hello Kitty related on our desk, but that is just a thing. So I can't tell if the person was calling us the Hello Kitty Club because we were all the Asians, or if we were being called the Hello Kitty Club because they could identify, because I had the Keropi doll, or not doll, it was like a pen cap. It was like the little frog character, and then one of them had Hello Kitty, and then the other one had like one of the other characters or something like that. We all had our own specific character, and I can't tell if the person called us that because we were the Asians or because they could identify the thing that was on our desk as Hello Kitty related things. So that was like early days of my career. So I was always very aware of my race in whatever space I was in. Like when I worked at the market research firm, my boss was a really intense white woman, and she always had people of color that she hired into the positions, but then whenever they would quit, she'd be just like, they don't have the work ethic. And over time that started to become more obvious to me what she was saying when she was saying they. And she would say things to me that I think in hindsight are probably telling me that I was a credit to all my races, all my yellow and brown and black, because I was there working all the time. And it wasn't until towards the end that she actually hired a couple white folks there, but they had the same struggles that everybody else had. The place was intense and ridiculous, and there was no reason to be working the kind of hours that I was working there. But yeah, throughout my whole career, it's been something like that, where either I was the only female boss of 5 bosses. At Dell, I developed the nickname the Hatchet because at Dell we had to fire people with 2 managers in the room at the same time, and the male managers that I worked with could never fire their own people. They would be so emotional, and then they would turn to me, and I'd end up having to fire people who I don't even know. They were not working for me, but I was just the secondary manager in the office that was meant to be there in observation. And it became a thing that anytime someone needed to be fired, bring Sharmane along because she can do it for you, because I was the Hatchet, because I could approach it very unemotional. And so like I was the only female manager.
But it's also like, okay, get this like black woman to do your dirty work type of thing. You
exactly.
know what I mean? Like you can't fucking handle it. So it was just so typical.
And
But
afterwards,
anyway.
they would say to me like, "Oh, you feel like you don't feel bad, but like for me, this was really hard." And so they would thank me for doing it for them at the same time telling me I was an unemotional person. And one, it's not that I'm
But
an
that's how
unemotional.
either we're unemotional or too emotional. It's like, oh
Exactly.
well, like it's kind of like that concept that Black folks have a higher pain tolerance.
Right.
It's like kind of thing like, oh, you all can handle anything, but then if we say something, it's like, oh, you're so emotional and angry and blah blah blah. Like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, to have a nickname like that, like, it was kind of funny to have it, but at the same time, like, when you think about the reason why I have that name because I'm not the one in the room crying. Does that mean that I'm unemotional? No, but a couple of things are going on here. One, I don't know this person that I'm now being told to terminate, So I don't have the emotional connection to, like, I had a hard time firing a few people in my past because they were people who worked for me and overall I liked them, but for work reasons I had to let them go. But the thing is, I could do it, and that was what set me apart from the four other white guys that I worked with, is that they couldn't do that. And so yeah, they were sending their woman of color out there to do their dirty work, and then also like marvel at my ability to do it. And that it was really about me doing it without tears. And so now I make a joke about being the hatchet and things like that, but when you think about the origin of it and what it was that I was doing, I was also the lowest paid of all of us, things like that. I was a novelty. I got brought into offices or meetings with the big bosses, and they'd be like, "Oh, look at you." I've had
Wow.
several times throughout my career, I've had
That seems to
the
be a
"Oh, look
common
at you."
refrain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I'm a woman of color and I am, a tenacious little go-getter and, all that kind of stuff. I tend to advance really quickly, or at least in my past, I have always advanced really quickly into positions. And then I hit a ceiling. And it was only one time when I blew past that ceiling and was able to be a department head at a tech startup that I was starting to feel like all my skills and the fact that I was a person of color, the fact that I was a queer person, all that kind of stuff didn't matter. It was just my skills. But then I became a problem there as well, and that ended also. So it's just like a series of things have kind of plagued my career, in which I'm a great novelty for as long as they can handle me. And usually I leave on my own terms. Usually I'm moving to another state or something like that, and that's when I leave. But ever since I've been here in LA, I've been back to LA for 4 years. I have actually worked in 4 different positions, 2 of which I lost involuntarily, which had never happened to me in my career before, and it kind of freaks me out at 40 years old to be losing jobs. And 2 I left of my own accord, but because I did leave them in less than a year, that tends to be held against me now that I'm looking for work. Well, why didn't you stay?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's my obligation to be like, well, these were toxic work environments and I had to choose my mental health over the place. And then it's like, oh, so she'll leave if we're toxic.
Oh, geez. It's like you can't
You
win for
cannot
losing.
win. Yeah,
It's like which is you brought up an interesting point that I wanted to like mention, and then it's something I'll circle back to as I talk about kind of my background. But you said that up until being out here, something you had never experienced was like basically involuntarily leaving a position. And that's actually like, now that I think about it, that's actually the same for me too. I never had that happen until being out here. I had one, like I've had things come to an end. Like I've worked positions that were like temporary or like a fellowship type of
Right,
thing where
sure.
it's for a set amount of time. So that was, that situation. But in terms of like being let go or something like that my only experience was with that has been out here. So
Yeah, for
that's
me
very
it's
interesting
scary
to me.
because like this is where I'm from, like, and I'm not good enough to stay anywhere here where I'm from. There's a little bit of that I'm feeling. It's also being 41 and being nervous about what it means to be, to try to find stable employment now, which has never been a problem for me. It used to be that I hunkered down with a company for a long time because I put the value of the company over me, not realizing that it was okay to choose myself before the job for many, many years. And now, basically, once I started to choose myself over situations that I thought were, maybe I had a moral issue with it, or I didn't believe in the boss, maybe, different various reasons of why I made it obvious that I was choosing myself, those tend to be the situations that have gotten me swiftly exited out the door. And that it's actually pretty scary because I don't know now. Like right now I'm in a situation where I left a job that was toxic, but I did it right. I got a new job. I turned in a notice. I started the new job. And within 2 weeks, that job, I wasn't a fit for that job. And they weren't a fit for me. And the reason why I wasn't a fit is because I was saying, this is how I can do this job. Like, you sold me job A, but what it actually is job B. So if you want me to do job B, which is not what I would have accepted, I'm going to have to do it this way. And because that's the level of my skill, the level of my comfort, and it just wasn't what they needed. So they let me go. And so I basically put myself in a position of leaving a toxic space for my mental health and ending up in a place that wasn't necessarily toxic, but their work expectations were not what they sold me. And they weren't very reasonable. I don't think I would have been able to grow into being a fit for that place, to be honest, based off of their expectations. And so they let me go. So then I have to sit here and be like, was that stupid of me to leave the toxic job that was stable to choose?
Right, but I mean, you had no way of knowing
I had no
too
way
that
of
that was gonna.
knowing.
I mean, because that's something that I've experienced as well with that shifting. I mean, I've worked. It's really interesting to me because like when I think about just growing up in this whole idea of like having a career and stuff like that, it was always like, oh well, work hard and get good grades and kind of that type of thing. Go to school, go to college, and pursue what it is you want to do. But at the same time, there was still the expectation of, working to pay bills, like working a job just to have a job.
Right.
So when I look back at it, it was definitely these conflicting, contradictory type of messages that I was learning or that were being ingrained that, hey, if I just do this, this, and this, I can really pursue whatever it is I want to do. But at the same time, like, you are economically oppressed, you are poor, I was going to say, and you need to be able to make money to pay your bills or to help out around the house and stuff like that. So, I mean, my mom never put pressure on me to work or anything, in terms of like, oh, you need to work and like pay a bill in the house or anything. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, I understood that my mom was a single mother who was working oftentimes more than one job at a time. Like it was her baseline to work more than one job at a time. And
Mm-hmm.
so as I got older, when I got to a point where I could work, I wanted to because I recognized that and I wanted to do, at least in my mind as a 14, 15-year-old or whatever, I wanted to be able to try to help. And even prior to that age, I was like babysitting and tutoring and stuff like that. So probably from the age of about 11 or 12, I did some type of job, whether it was like formal or informal, like initially just kind of babysitting and stuff. And then as I got older, I got a job at a summer camp. So I worked during the summers. And then I ended up like entering the, I guess, more mainstream workforce. And I worked at the airport, at the Atlanta airport when I was in high school. So I did like a work program where I could leave school early and go to work. And
Mm-hmm.
because I was done, I didn't have anything to do in class. I would literally like do my work, put it in an envelope, slide it under the door. Like I did not want to be there. And I'm just like, it was no point. And my teachers, for the most part, I had one who had issues with me, but she just had her own. I don't know. I don't know if I triggered something for her, but she just had her own issues for me. She tried to make things difficult. All of my other teachers like signed off on me being able to leave early, and she tried to give me a hard time about it. But I'm like, if I'm doing well in your class, like what are you complaining about? I don't want to be here. So I did the program where I would leave and go work, and so I got accustomed to working and to juggling like school and work, and I did essentially, well, I guess you can call it an internship or fellowship. I don't know what to call it, but I worked with a newspaper that was like distributed to all of the, I guess you could say, Metro Atlanta schools, Metro Atlanta middle and high schools. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would be down there a lot. And so that was like a job based or kind of like an internship type of thing, a hobby. Well, it was more than a hobby. I mean, I definitely took it seriously and I was there all the time, but I was juggling doing that, which I was passionate about, and working a job, just to have that income, and going to school. So I got accustomed to that and not realizing that, like, hey, a lot of other kids, like I was still a kid, a lot of other kids are not doing this,
Right.
but that was normal to me. So when I went to college was very much like a culture shock to me because I like the idea that kids were like in school and not working, like in college and not having to work and, just being
Right.
like call up your parents to buy this and do this and pay for this. That blew my mind. Like, I was just like, what the hell? Like, you mean you don't work? Like, and some of the stuff that came along with that. I mean, yeah, so it was just like, it was very weird to me. So I had this mixture of wanting to pursue what I was passionate about, but also needing a job so that I could pay bills and, make a living. And I feel like I've always been juggling that as I look back on kind of like I posted on Facebook not so long ago. I was like, I've been in the workforce I'm only 31. I've been in the workforce for 17 years. I mean, formally, that's not
Right.
even including like, kind of the babysitting and the tutoring and
Side
the
money,
doing
yeah.
hair type of stuff. Yeah, that's just like me getting my first job that gave me a check, that was like, not some just kind of side thing. That was at 14. So I've been in the workforce for 17 years and for more than half my life. And during this time, it's been a constant kind of merry-go-round of like me trying to pursue what I love and do what I'm passionate about and wanting to make a living off that. And also just needing to make a living and working, a full-time job, and how taxing, or hell, even if you work a part-time, how taxing and draining it is to work for other people and try to pursue, what it is that you want to do. Or I won't even just say working for other people, but to work, period, to work in something that you don't necessarily want to do, just to
Yeah.
make a living as you try to pursue whatever it is that you actually want to do. And so I had that kind of going on. And then being a Black woman, though, I felt like that was part of what was expected of me. I felt like as a Black person and as a Black woman, like I'm supposed to work. Like I'm supposed to work. I'm supposed to like grind and hustle. It's like all of that rhetoric, and
Right.
not complain, and just kind of like, this is just a part of life, even though that's not the reality for many children or for many folks. Like, you can look at white kids who don't have to work, and then they end up, being able to just go to school, focus on that, take some time off and really get this development. And not even just white kids, like, because it's definitely economic things that play there too. So folks with money, because even if you are, a person of color and you have the economic means to where you can provide a certain type of lifestyle for your children so that they don't have to work. It's not a mandatory thing. Like, they can just if they want to go to college, and focus on that, and then like take the time, not feel like they have to rush to move out, all that type of stuff. So there's a lot of things at play for me. When I finished high school, like, I had it set in my mind to move, like, once I was 18, and I didn't have like a bad home life or anything. It was nothing going on at home, honestly, which, like, I actually don't even know if I've like admitted this to my mom. Yeah, I may have, because we talk about a bunch of stuff, but I don't know if I have or not. But I honestly just wanted to like relieve her of me as a economic responsibility.
Yeah.
That was like 110% why I wanted to leave. I love my mom. I loved being in the home with my mom and my sister, and we didn't have any issues there where I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to get out of this house. But I know that my mom was grinding, and I wanted to kind of like lessen her load. At least that was my perspective. Even though she never was like, hey,
Yeah.
she never like, made us feel like a burden or anything like that. Like, that's not, because some folks will do that. Like, oh, I spend
Sure,
all my
yeah.
money on y'all kids. It wasn't like that. But I just observed her as a Black woman, and as me being like a growing young Black woman, and watching her, like, how much she worked and how much she did and stuff. It just made me feel some kind of way. I was like, I don't want my mom working this damn hard. Like, I still
Right.
to this day feel a way that I can't take care of her. But yeah, so I just was like, I want to move, because I just wanted to take that responsibility away from her. And so that's what I did. And so I've worked so many jobs. My wife says that she's like, you live such a bunch of lives, because I've worked a lot of jobs. And it's not like I just kind of pop in and out of jobs, but I
Right.
work jobs simultaneously.
Yeah, I was working
um,
3 jobs while I was going to college. It took me 7 years to get my bachelor's, and being the first person in my family to go to college, that's fine to me. That it took me that long, but that I still got it. But the reason why it took me that long is because I had to work 3 jobs.
See, that's what I'm saying. Like, it took me 5 years, and including going to summer school too. It took me 5 years to finish because I was working. So I didn't have the experience of kind of like just being at school and being able to only focus on school. I
Right.
definitely was working full time throughout my time in college, and a lot of times working multiple jobs. Like, I might be working two part-time jobs or whatever. just to add up to what it was that I needed. So,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, like this, some of the things that I saw, um, kind of coming up as I was growing up and having these jobs and stuff was that I did have those moments like Charmaine mentioned about like oh, look at you. I've gotten that a lot in different positions that I worked in. I've done everything from manual labor like loading trucks, to being an administrative assistant, to being a research assistant. I've been like an educator. I did student teaching for 2 years. So I've done a lot of different jobs. I've worked like in retail. I worked at the airport. I worked at the airport 3 times, three different positions. So I did like retail at the job, like just like I mean at the airport, like in a store, like cashier type thing. I worked for the Department of Aviation briefly. I had like a paid internship with them, and I worked for American Express slash Delta during like their Sky Mile stuff. So I've had like a range of jobs. I've worked in care coordination. I worked at plenty of call centers. I won't say plenty. I worked at a few call centers. I've had like maybe three like call center type jobs. So yeah, I feel like I've done kind of pretty much some of everything except for like maybe fast food. Um,
Yeah, I never
and
did fast food. The closest I
I
did to
know.
that was I worked at a movie theater. I was probably a little bit too old to work at the movie theater too, because it was when I was like about to graduate, so I was already like 24, 25, and that was the closest to fast food that I ever did because sometimes I had to do concession.
Yeah, I mean, I've helped my mom with like concessions and food service stuff before. My mom went to culinary school and she used to cater. So I've done that before and like worked with her doing that. I helped her when she was a CNA. And I mean, these are things that like she, compensated me for, like for basically assisting her. But I think I just never did fast food because well, I considered it, I think mainly just because like my vision, it makes me kind of nervous. I don't want to be dealing with nobody like with like mass
Yeah.
production type of thing. And so yeah, I mean, I've worked in all these different kind of jobs, and I've definitely gotten that reaction of, oh, like look at you, if I talk about something or present like or like just like give my opinion or give an idea about something when I worked in spaces that were dominated by either white folks or people older than me because I've often a lot of times been the youngest person. Um,
Mm.
it's been very like I think that just shifted for me being out here in LA. But for the most part at my jobs like in Atlanta, I'm struggling to think of a job where I wasn't the youngest person in the office or in the environment. So there was some of that like, oh, how do you know this? You're so young. There's also assumptions about my work ethic, or, like I would notice sometimes in the onboarding or just like when we have trainings and stuff, there's certain things they would stress with like me versus other people. For instance, things about attendance or,
Mm.
like I just notice people's body language or little comments they'll make like, if somebody's doing a training and they're talking to you about like counting down a drawer and, transferring money securely, like, not basically loss prevention type stuff, and they're kind of like focusing what they're saying on you. They're making
Wow.
assumptions about you, even though I'm like, I'm not trying to take y'all little money, and I'm definitely not the person who it needed to be directed to because some stuff went down. But it's those types of things, those like microaggressions that I noticed coming up in the workplace. So I think, it's very interesting to me because when we look at marginalized folks who are it's very much economically disadvantaged, we are hit with these mixed signals of, okay, do what you want to do. Like all you have to do is work hard and go to college and, pursue what it is. But also we're also expected to work, period. Like if we're not working, it's like, oh, there's something that you're not doing. So
Right.
we're expected to do both. And it's very difficult to do both.
Yeah, I mean, I've had things like that too, where I thought it was like, why was I the one who this was brought up with, on occasion. Um, I would say like overt racism or overt sexism didn't really wasn't super duper obvious until like the last 4 years, where I've literally had there's been moments in early parts of my careers where I was like, is that a race thing, or is that a gender thing or something? But in the last 4 years, it's been very overt in places. Like in one place I worked, the boss kept, and I've talked to you about this too, the boss kept saying, oh, you're black, right? Have you seen Green Book yet? And it was like for 3 months, he kept asking me if I saw Green Book or if I was going to see Green Book. And every time I tell him why I wasn't going to see Green Book, right? And then he was like, oh, but it's a good movie. And I'm like, can't possibly be a good movie if it's historically inaccurate and the family didn't sign off on it and all these kind of things. It's a white savior movie. I'd give all the reasons. And they were like, no, it was still good. But for 3 months, he wouldn't let it go. It was his way of letting me know he was down with me because he watched some black fucking movie, and I was like, no, it's not a black movie. It's a movie about a white guy who knew a black guy. That's what it is. Like, I don't know what to tell you. And so that was a thing that would come up on a regular basis. In one job, I was told that I was the best kind of diversity. Like literally, I was told this by a boss. I was the best kind of diversity hire because I checked off the black box, I checked off the Asian box, I checked off the woman box, and I checked off the LGBT box. And I was the HR director when I was told that.
Like the audacity. That's what trips me out. It's like people really be having the audacity out here to just say some wild shit. Like, are you kidding?
You turn it to this person and you're like, you can't say that, right? Like, and it's like, well, no, it's okay to say it to you because you're the HR person who's going to prevent me from getting in trouble. And it's like, yeah, but what you just did is something I could get you in trouble for. Do you not get this? But for his mentality, I was the person being paid.
Like that blissful ignorance that comes with privilege is just
yeah, it was just like, look, you're the person I pay for this, so you can't get me in trouble because of XYZ. And there was a whole lot of other problems at that place too. Like at that time, I was fully out of the closet about my bisexuality, about my polyamory. I was just like, I was coming off of this weird kind of high of where I was just like, I'm going to live my full ass life and everybody's going to know, I was in one of those patches, like, whatever. Okay, fine. So I was just like, no one's going to tell me I can't be who I am and I can still have a job and blah, blah, blah. But then I realized the fetishizing that was happening. And it was like, oh, see, this is why you don't come out. Because all of a sudden it's like, how lucky my husband was that I was polyamorous or that I was allowing him this lifestyle. How lucky I was that I was bisexual because I could bring women home and things like that. And even when one of the bosses met him, that was first thing out the gate, like, it was like, you have this amazing woman here, you're so lucky, and I bet your life is amazing. And it was like this whole thing about, because they knew, and they had decided what my bisexual polyamory was like, right? Like it was just me, just like him throwing out the fishing line and I was the hook and I'm just grabbing beautiful women, by the tons and bringing them home for my husband to enjoy. And you could tell that that's what they expected as it was. And from there, I started to be like, well, maybe I won't really be my full ass self, out in the world because of it. And then I worked for a couple of gay men and I thought, okay, this will be a safer place that I could be my full ass self. But, I was also I wasn't a real gay. I was only a bisexual and, plus I was a person of color. So we didn't roll in the same kind of circle. The questions that they would ask me, I would be like, no, that's not a thing that I do. And they're like, why don't you do that? And I was like, because that's, in my head, the events that they would be talking about, I was like, oh, that's mainly white guys, or, I was like, that's not something I would do, how disappointing I was because I didn't go to the Boulevard on a regular basis, Santa Monica Boulevard and things like that.
You weren't right. You're not the right kind of.
I'm not the right kind of gay for that.
LGBT
like
for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is that I appeared to be the right kind of gay because my headshot is basically me in drag. My friend did makeup and my hair was still purple and blue at the time, so I look at that picture. I love that picture, but I look at that picture and I see me in drag. And they saw that too. And they were like, oh, she's going to be fabulous. We're going to have her here and she's going to be this. And then they meet me in real life and who I really am. And who I really am is just kind of like, yeah, I'm bisexual polyamorous. What's up? And so I was a disappointment.
Womp womp.
Yeah, it was just like I was
Like,
basically
sorry,
Peppermint Patty,
but
except for I also like boys. So,
right.
so
They're
yeah.
like, this isn't what we expected. I mean, it's interesting to me because like I recognize that in terms of like navigating my race versus my sexual orientation, like I mean, I'm from Atlanta, so Atlanta is very black. So the some of the issues that I had with in regards to working in Atlanta largely were not really because of race. I did have some issues of sexism, and then I had issues of like just folks power tripping or feeling like, kind of that. Because of my background, like, oh, you just some, like I've been perceived as like you just some hood chick or whatever. So like, what do
Mm,
you know about this or what do you know about that? Or you can't possibly know these things. And I'm like,
mm-hmm.
I can be both. Like, I can be from the projects and like know shit that you don't know. Like, this is a
Right.
possibility. This is the reality. You just feel some kind of way about it. But so it was more so that my issues with race, because a lot of times my peers and even my immediate supervisors and stuff were mostly black or people of color. So it was like the higher ups that a lot of times will be white people.
Mm,
And so the only time that was an issue for me is like because I am someone who will challenge things if I feel like it's a problem. And
yeah.
so I'll go above you. I'm like, okay, all right, manager, like you're not giving me what I want. I will be quick. I am the queen of sending out that damn email. You know how folks joke around about like, per my email, blah, blah, that's me. That
Yeah.
is
Oh,
me.
that's me
Like,
too.
I am like the queen of like the corporate cuss out. I will cuss your ass out
The
without
corporate cuss out.
and I believe in emails and documentation. So I would be like, I would be quick with that, regarding this conversation on blah, blah, blah. Like, even when I would have conversations with higher ups and stuff like that, I would make sure that I would follow up with the email. I'd be like, okay, so just to recap, like,
Oh, me
I want you
too.
in writing. So I'm that person. So like they definitely had a problem with that. Like they probably was like, who the hell this heifer thinks she is?
And
Like,
also blind
um,
copy your personal email when you send those emails
yep.
out so that when you're not at that place anymore, you have that
Don't have
shit.
access, still have it. Oh yeah, I BCC myself like immediately. So yeah, or forward it to my, forward the exchange to myself or something like that because yeah, I'm like y'all ain't about to play me. But that was definitely like a I noticed like that's really more so when it became an issue if in times of either me challenging something or me wanting to advance and me expressing that I deserve to when I would have to have those like kind of face to face things with white folks, that was when it would come up. But other than that, it was mostly like sexism and um, and then stuff regarding my sexual orientation. And I've mentioned before on the show, like I'm selectively out, and I used to be
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like just out, and really for me going through certain things in the workplace, that's what caused me to kind of be more selective about being out and not just kind of it just being all across the board because that can be an interesting type of situation. And I found too that's more so been a situation with for the most part, not always, but with more so coworkers, peers, more so than like upper management.
Right.
um
I'd agree
so
with
it's
that.
like I see there's a difference. Like for me with race stuff, that's been more so like a in the matter of like hierarchy and power structure and like me dealing with folks who were above me in the hierarchy. And then with my sexual orientation, that's more so been I guess a area of contention with coworkers.
Yeah, I think I can see that. I mean, besides, I definitely have been sexualized by managers once they find out that I'm bisexual, but coworkers have been like for me it's also it's being an atheist too. If I'm out about being an atheist, which I tend to be all the time regardless if I'm out about my sexual orientation, those tend it's the religion and the sexual orientation that tends to be the you know forget about if someone finds out that you're poly. Then it's all of a sudden like, oh, you just
Oh
trying
Lord,
to get
that's a
to
whole
hell,
other
aren't you? You
situation.
know, like you're just trying to do all the wrong things. And how often that a nice older woman will try to adopt me to correct my problems, you know, with
Yeah, I've been there
coworkers, like
before.
that's been a thing. That's been a thing pretty often. And it's just one of those things too where you're just like, why is this your job all of a sudden to be concerned about whether or not I'm going to hell because I'm bisexual, because I'm polyamorous, because I'm an atheist, whatever. It's getting in the way at work. That has been a thing for me. I've also been told by either coworkers or people that were older than me but reported to me that I'm really a good boss. Like this is one in particular. There was a person who was my direct report, and she would say, you're a really good boss. We just have to work on your life. And that had to do with them being
What the hell?
they were a Jehovah's Witness. And so it was the whole thing about, me being openly all the shit that I am openly about typically. Now because of that entire work environment and what happened to me at the when I left there, I'm less inclined to be out about anything at work. But I get this thing needles at me, and I think this is kind of the plight of the bisexual person, is that when you partner with a person of the opposite sex, my primary partner is a man, um, and people just accept you as straight, there's this thing in the back of your head that just doesn't want to be straight, just doesn't want people to think you're straight. And so every now and then when you think you're gonna just kind of be quiet and not tell anybody, then you're just like, please don't think of me as straight, and it just kind of comes out eventually. So that has been a thing when in places where I've decided I wasn't going to be out, it has eventually kind of boiled to the surface, because it's really hard to not be
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Like it's really hard to
It is, especially
have to be
somewhere where you
quiet.
spend so much time.
Yeah.
Like you spend a lot of time at work, and that's something that I think when we look at kind of like our work culture, just kind of in our society, they try to push this idea of like, oh, we're a family and we accept this and we accept that. And when I was younger, I used to buy into that to an extent because we do
Mm-hmm.
spend so much time with these folks. But then as I've gotten older and wiser, I'm like, that's some bullshit. We are not family. We work together. Like this is our
Right.
relationship. And not, kind of getting caught up in all of that rhetoric about being family, because that's when it, the lines start to get blurry and people think that they have that access to you to be able to ask questions about your personal life and know certain things about you. And on one hand, it is hard not to talk about those things because work, just like with school, it takes up such a huge chunk of your time and your day and your life that it's hard to go through that without, just you having regular ass conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, these things that are parts of you are going to be just a part of your regular ass conversation. But at the same time, it's like, well, people start to kind of like take that and run with it, or they have all these expectations about how intertwined you should be with folks that you work with. Like even the whole thing about, oh, well, adding folks on Facebook or spending time together outside of work. And I think that for folks who are marginalized in some way, whether it's because of your gender or your race or your sexual orientation, we have other things we have to consider when we're navigating those relationships. So we can be in an environment where there's like, oh, well, we're all family, blah, blah, blah. But okay, in this family, I'm the only Black person, or in this family, I'm the only woman, or I'm the only queer person. And that creates another element to the dynamic that for me, as I've navigated through different jobs and stuff, it's just become more and more honestly kind of difficult to navigate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I make a decision to not be out at work anymore, but at the same time, it's hard not to be because people talk about their partners and their spouses and stuff all the
Yeah.
time. And I kind of like will either just pick and choose, like maybe with some people I might say like wife, or with some people I say partner or spouse, and I try to keep it neutral. But even with using neutral terms, people be like, oh, well, does he do this? Or you're,
Yeah.
they kind of make that assumption that, I'm straight. And so it's something, then I have to decide, okay, am I going to correct them? How important is this to me? On one hand, this is work. You know what I mean? Like these are
Right.
my coworkers. these are my, like we have a very specific reason that we're in one another's lives. On the other hand, I spend so much of my time here and with these people, we're gonna see each other, like we have, a lot of time together. In my current position and in my last job, they're primarily, well, my last job, I was in the field 100% of the time, really like 99% of the time. And with my current job, I'm in the field, but I also have like a kind of like a home base, and I have a team. So like we at least we'll see each other once a week for our team meetings, even if we don't see each other the rest of the week because we're all out in the field working with our patients and stuff. But and so now, because I'm new to this, I've only been at this current job for a little over a month. So now I'm trying to navigate, okay, well, how out do I want to be? How much of myself do I want to share? Like, I do see these folks on a regular basis, but at the same time, I'm still going to be like out in the field or whatever a lot of time too. So how open do I want to be, or, just that type of stuff. And I mean, in my current job, there are a lot of protections and stuff in terms of discrimination. So I'm not worried about that, but it's still in those interpersonal relationships, those one-on-one dynamics. I'm like, okay, how is this going to impact this dynamic? How often do I have to be around this person? Like, just, how deep is this shit gonna get? So
Right.
I think we have more things to consider when we have all these intersections, like when we have to think about, okay, well, I have to work, with these white people, like, are they looking at me as like I'm going to be the person carrying all the weight? Just all those types of things. Or I'm working with men and I have to worry about, like in my current job, I primarily work with people of color, which is, so that's been nice
That's
actually, because I
awesome.
haven't had to deal with navigating much whiteness, but I have had the issue of, like either just being assumed to be straight, or this guy said something to me about, what did he say? He was like, "Oh, you're married, you look single," or something. I was like, "What?
What?
What the hell are you talking about?" So
What is
just
looking
stuff like
single
that.
even
Exactly.
is a
And I
thing?
think it was his way of trying to like maybe be flirty and funny. Um, but I wasn't feeling it. I'm not here
Right.
for it.
Oh,
Like,
gosh.
so yeah, so I think that we have all these things we have to consider as we look at kind of how we navigate the workplace. Like, we can't just, it's not just a matter, it would be nice if it was just like a clock in, clock out type of situation, but we have all this other shit we have to think about, and nobody other than white men get the privilege of just clocking in, clocking out, and going
Right.
about their business.
Because people get real sensitive if you close up. Like, one problem that I have wherever I work is that when people say, hey, I was trying to find you on Facebook and I couldn't find you. And I'm like, yeah, you're not going to be able to find me. And they're like, oh, you're not on Facebook? And no, I'm on Facebook. Oh, well, let's friend up. I don't friend
People
people that
get
I
in their
work with. Yeah, and
feelings.
I'm like, I
They
don't
get in their
friend people
feelings.
that I work with. Why? Because there's things about my life that I would rather not be in the workplace. And they're like, oh, but we're friends, we're family, like you say. And it's just, again, if things get complicated here at work, I don't want you to be inserting, I don't want you seeing my
Personal
personal
stuff.
life and thinking about how my personal life is informing what's happening at work, or me bitching. Like, if I do happen to bitch, I don't need you knowing that shit about me. I have friended people that I've worked
Right.
with after I've left a job.
Mm-hmm.
And the
I have
only
to.
time that I've friended people that I was actively working with is when you're in the film industry. It's a little bit different. Networking is a constant thing. So when I've been
Mm-hmm.
on shows and things like that, I've definitely friended people, and some of them are reluctant. And after a show ends, I have culled my list a little bit and be like, okay, I probably not going to work with this person again. But that's a whole nother risk too,
Right. Like,
because
let me go ahead and go through. Yeah, I've done that too. Like, I'm like, okay, well, I'm probably not gonna really engage with this. I mean, I typically like on my Facebook, I will not put like where I work. Like, I don't, how you can kind of like put the
right,
actual location, and it like tags it or whatever. I do not do that. At my last job in Atlanta, I added like some of my coworkers on Facebook, not even all of them, but like a few that were my peers who worked in the same position as me, who were women of color. And we were just kind of like all on the same page. And we actually did engage outside of work. And that was like one of the first, that not even one of the first, that was the first time that I had been at a job where I actually, like, some of them I still communicate with today. Like, I did actually make friends at that job, but I think we also had the commonality of dealing with some bullshit at that job. So like we weren't out to get each other or out to be like, let me see what you're doing, and kind of like mixing the personal with the work. Like when we were at work, that's, we would do our work stuff, and then we would just go out afterwards, and then we can bitch together, and then, but we took an interest in each other's lives in general, so that now we still communicate. But it's just, I don't, for other jobs, I either don't add folks. I will preemptively block them. Like I'll look them up and go ahead and block them so they can't even see me.
Me too.
Because I ain't got time. Like we don't have to be connected on Facebook. And because I know for my Facebook, I'm gonna say what the fuck I want to say. Like,
you know what I'm
it
saying?
just is
like,
what it
yeah.
is. So you don't need to be, especially like, it's just certain people that don't need to be up on my Facebook. So I won't put my job on there, especially my last job. I worked for a nonprofit that has some religious affiliations. And they were fine or whatever, but I'm like, y'all not about to be on my Facebook. Now, my current job, in our like policies, there's like a specific policy that basically says like, you can't be like targeted or punished or whatever for your social media presence, that type of thing. So that's policy. But even still, I'm just like, and I mean, it's a little different. I mean, because like the program I work in and the people I work with, we do see eye to eye on a lot of things, especially like social issues. And that's why we do the work we do, because I'm in human services.
Right.
And so we work at getting services for folks who are people of color. We work with mostly people of color, folks who are homeless or poor or have chronic illness. So it's like the type of people that are drawn to those jobs are just a certain type of people. So, and even still, I don't have my job on my Facebook. I don't have them added as friends, because I'm like, you still got to have that separation, and I'm still being mindful of like my personal stuff. Like we may agree on social issues, but at the same time, I'm a Black queer woman. I don't know like what kind of personal stuff you got going on. I don't know if you're homophobic. I don't know if you're gonna act differently towards me or whatever, and we need to work together, and it's gonna be weird. It's just, we have so much shit that we have to consider, that it would be nice if we didn't have to consider all of that.
Right.
But that's just the reality.
Oops. And I was on mute.
and
and there's been so many times too where you think you have that connection with somebody that you can go that route, and it ends up backfiring. I think I would say that happened probably more when I was younger than it does now, because I'm such a guarded person that there's very few chances that
learn
kind of stuff.
from it.
Right.
That's so true though.
But because listening to you and also thinking about some of the stuff that I've experienced, it's like, oh yeah, when I was younger, I grinded so hard and I put so much of my labor and my effort and really kind of chipped away at me creatively, like the opportunities I could have probably created for myself when I was younger, but didn't, because I really thought I had to work and grind, because that was the message, right? Bootstraps and all that kind of bullshit. But now that you're older, you're just like, I don't want to fucking do this. Like, I don't want to do this for other people. I want my effort.
You've been doing it so long.
Yeah.
That the shit is draining. Like at this point, I'm 31 and I'm fucking tired,
I know.
Bro. Like
I've been paying taxes since I was 16. Like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm like, I'm tired.
Yeah. So for me right now, it's like, I don't like, I've had friends who have just had job after job after job. And I'm like, how do you keep getting jobs if you work at so many different places for such a short amount of time? Where I have a couple of jobs that I've worked at for many years, and then I have a series of jobs that I worked at for like a year or 2 years or a year and a half, and it's just like things as I've gotten older haven't worked out quite the way I would have imagined. Part of it is because I'm too old for this shit and I'm not going to let this happen to me, and part of it is because circumstance, whatever, ended up pushing me out. Those two positions that I lost that were involuntary, it was things that really bothered me because I had no control over it, right? Like I wasn't a person who had, my agency was totally gone in these situations, and I just had to fucking suck it up or whatever and deal with my life, which is what I'm going through right now. but I don't want, like, I know what I want to do. I want to build ManeHustle Media. I want to grow our shows. I want to start being able to make money off of our shows. I know some of the areas in which we could improve, like we need to promote our Patreons a little bit better. We need to promote our sponsorship a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
But also, our show needs to grow to be big enough for advertisers and things, so people to start giving us
Right.
money so we can
To
do
garner that
this.
attention.
You know,
Yeah.
there is that. And part of that is our communities need to come through for us too and be like, you know, we're getting something out of you, you know, help give back so that we can grow this, so that other people look at us and like, oh, you can do this, oh, I'm going to do it too. You know, this is the kind of stuff that we need to be focusing on now, so that we can grow this second chapter or whatever in our professional life, in which we own our own companies, or we own our own, I like agency in being what we want to be, like do what we want to do, make money the way we want to make money. But right now it's like I'm
Right.
exhausted by earning money for rich people, because I've been doing that for
Mm-hmm.
so much
Absolutely.
of my career. And in a lot of cases, especially as an executive assistant, I'm directly working for the owner of a company. And more than that, I know all their shit. I know if they're cheating on their wives. I know if they're, you know, I know if they're on a business trip or if they're on a business trip. You know, like I know a lot of shit about the people that I've worked for. And part of my job is discretion. Some of my job is to facilitate some of that shit. You know, like there's been things that I've been asked to do or expected to do that ends up making me feel like if I don't do it, I lose my job, and then I don't have the ability to
Absolutely.
make money and feed my family. Meanwhile, this person can feed all the families that they have. You know, like things like that. I've had this kind of conundrum several times, and in the end of the day, my biggest mistake early in my career was feeling irreplaceable. And now that I understand as an older person that everybody is replaceable, and so with that in mind, I'm only willing now to give the labor that I'm willing to give for the sake of me paying my bills. And other than that, I need my time off to be my time off so that I can develop my own shit. So I can, you know, do militantly mix and black radical queer and blurred comics and bi fear, you know, like that needs to be my time. And that's harder to come by now, because the expectation is that you give everything of yourself to a company. I was going through surgery. I had ovarian tumors when I was 22 years old. I was going through surgery and I was at this company I'd been at for a couple of years at this point. I was working so many hours. It was a market research firm that I mentioned in the beginning. And as I'm freaking out that I don't know if I have cancer or if I just have a growth or whatever, all I know is that I have tumors and they're going to remove them. And I had surgery scheduled for a couple weeks out. My boss tells me, it feels like you're pulling away from the company. And I'm like, I have something serious going on in my life. I don't know if I have cancer or not. My dad died of cancer. This is a shit that's in my mind. So, yeah, I'm not really focused on the company 100% at the moment, you know? And they're like, well, see,
Right.
that's a big problem for us, because if it was basically their mentality was, if it was an actual emergency, my surgery wouldn't be scheduled for 2 weeks out. That if it was an
Wow.
actual emergency, they would have just done the thing. And I go, but do you understand that I asked for a delay so that I could wrap shit up here at work so that you could get someone in place to cover for me while I'm out? That was me thinking about the company before myself, you know? So because of that,
Right.
I have 2 weeks of stress that I wouldn't have had if I didn't do that, you know? And so that, you would think that that would have been the main lesson that would have told me, you know, you got to take care of you first. But I was a kid. I was still 22 years old thinking I was a big boss because I was a project manager more by circumstance than by actual talent at that point. Everybody quit and I just kept rising. I just kept grinding every time someone quit, you know? Um, and I've had a few other lessons like that early on that finally got me to the state where I'm just like, I am replaceable. So they are replaceable. And I will do the job. I will clock in. I will clock out. I will do the job that I have to do. But I am no longer, especially after the big company, the thing that happened to me a couple years ago, I am no longer going to give my all for somebody else's money anymore. Like, never
Yeah.
again.
I mean, that's important, and I think that's a good, like, of course, as you know, my folks know, always talk about the different ways that we really have to kind of like shift our focus to centering ourselves. And of course, in the professional realm, that's no different. We are taught to put companies ahead of ourselves, put everything and everybody ahead of ourselves. And I've had to learn, the hard way that you can invest your literal blood, sweat, and tears, put your body on the line for someone else to make money, and it just does not end up benefiting you really in the end. And so we have to be unapologetic about pursuing those things that we really want to do, whether it's for working for ourselves or for someone else, but it just actually being what you want to do. Because folks will try to sell you a pipe dream and be like, oh well, we're a family and you can do this, that, and the third here, but ultimately the bottom line is making that money, and they're willing to do whatever they need to do that, including replace you, including not pay you what you should be making, not compensating you accordingly, all those things. So we have to it which and I'm saying this even though I understand that there are a lot of barriers to that. There are a lot of barriers to us being able to truly center ourselves in the way that we need to. There's economic barriers. I mean, sometimes you just need a fucking job just to have a job, and that's been
Right.
a large part of my reality is like, okay, I got to have this job because I have bills to pay. Like, we have to be able to literally make a living. And so I understand that we most of the time don't have the option or the privilege to be like, oh, I'm going to leave this place and, before having something else lined up, or, I don't have to do this because it's like, no, like it's been my last job. I was there for a year and a half only because I was like just trying to not, I was trying to tough it out until I got something else. I was like, you know what? I can't, even though I don't want to be at this job anymore. After about 6 months in, I was like, this is not like I'm not having any room for growth, any advancement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not making enough money, but I still stayed with, the hours fluctuated, but I still stayed with that job because I'm like, well, I can't leave this until I have something else. And that's a common thing. That's, typically the economic situation that we're in, where we're, barely making a living wage. So it's like, okay, well, I don't have money just stacked up to be able to leave a job and
Right.
have this, cushion. So I gotta wait till I find something else. And the onboarding process for my current job took a long time. It's just kind of like the nature of
Yeah, that really
of
did.
the realm I'm in. It took a long time. So I had to tough it out at this other job because I was like, I can't, even though I'm underemployed and I'm underpaid, I still can't afford to not be at this job. Like, it was literally just enough to pay my bills.
Mm.
And that was only partially because I have, a partner who makes more than me and who was able to kind of like accommodate me in that way. But I couldn't just not work. We ain't got it like that.
Yeah.
So it was a necessary evil. So I say, of course, that like, we do need to center ourselves, but I also recognize the barriers to that, and that, we have a long way to go in dismantling that. But all that we can do is, try to do it in the little ways that we can as we go day to day, even if that's just a matter of saying, hey, like when I'm off, I'm off. Like when I have another phone for my job, I cut it off. 5 o'clock, that shit's turned off. Don't
Mm-hmm.
like it. I'm off the clock, or just, setting those boundaries. With my current job, I mean, they're very adamant about like, hey, the time you work is the time you work, and when you're off, that should have to wait. But my last job, I just had to set very firm, because they were a little less structured. I had to set very firm boundaries with them and say, I'm not doing this. Like, I know initially I was on call for them, and after they called me randomly to come in, and I was like trying to do wedding prep, and I was like, no, like this is supposed to be my time. And so after that, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be on call anymore. Like, I will have a set schedule, or I'm not going to let y'all randomly at the last minute assign me to a shift. I'll pick up a shift if I want to. Like, I had to set very clear boundaries with them. So I think that in whatever little small ways, the small victories that we can have, for us to do that, whatever's within our means, is important as we kind of navigate this professional realm. So, but yeah, I just wanted to kind of wrap up with that because I know that it's been a while. I'm trying to be mindful of episode time, but yeah, it's something that impacts our everyday lives. We're out here trying to make a living, so it's something that I wanted to be able to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
So that's it for me. Any final thoughts you want to add?
No, I mean, I think, yeah, I agree with you about the barriers. I mean, the fact of the matter is that even now I'm looking for punch the clock kind of job to get through while we're continuing to build this, and you have to accept a reasonable amount of that, but you also do have to take care of yourself and your mental health. So if it gets to that point, you know, we have to try to find ways to support ourselves to do that, and it just sucks that we have to do that. It fucking sucks.
Right. Yeah.
You know, no gap years, no taking time off to find myself and all that kind of stuff.
Listen.
That shit don't happen for us. That just don't happen. So.
My gap year was me finishing undergrad and me working, and before I went to grad school.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, that was like I didn't even plan to go to grad school, but yeah, so that was the space in between undergrad and grad school for me was working. But yeah, I mean, we definitely deal with a lot of barriers. But yeah, so as usual, I appreciate you all tuning in. Thank you, Sharmane, for being on with me. This is something that, of course, we could continue to discuss, because work is such a huge, we live in a capitalist society, you know, like work is such a huge part of our lives, and so much of the messages we get, you know, kind of like intertwines our self-worth into this whole idea of work and all that. So it's something that's always relevant, and something I just wanted to be able to have a conversation about. But and I'm sure we'll have to circle back to multiple times, because it you know, looks different from different people's perspectives. You know, there's so many different industries and economic differences and all that. So yeah, but I'm glad that we at least were able to have this kind of like preliminary conversation about it. And yeah, I appreciate you coming on
Thanks
in
for
front of
having
the
me back.
scene. So that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in as usual. I appreciate it. And until next time, that's it. We done. That's all I got for today. Black Radical Queer is a ManeHustle Media podcast hosted by Javia Nicole. BRQ is produced and edited by Sharmane Fury, and the show's theme music was created by The Brothers Records. You can connect with us on Twitter or Instagram at Black Rad Queer. That's BLK RAD QWR. You can also connect with us on Facebook through the Black Radical Queer Podcast Facebook fan page or the BRQ discussion group. You can get Black Rad Queer merch on teespring.com/Black Rad Queer, BLK RAD QWR. And you can leave a voicemail, call in, ask a question, those types of things on the BRQ Google Voice line. And that number is 937-601-8647.
ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.